Tommy contacted the interstate worker and entered into a payment agreement for current support, plus 25% to go towards arrears. The worker agreed to this amount because Tommy felt he could make his payment consistently. Sue was ecstatic when she got her first payment. She sent Tommy a text message to thank him and a picture of Baby. When Tommy saw Baby's picture, he smiled for the first time in months. Both parties were happy for a couple of years. Sue was doing well, Maggie was growing like a weed, Tommy was working hard and paying monthly. He sent Maggie email messages. Sue and Tommy became Facebook friends, so he could see pictures that she posted of their daughter. They worked out a time to Skype twice each week. Tommy would call and talk to Baby on the phone, and when she started preschool, she told her friends about her daddy who lived in Missouri. Sue printed a picture of Baby hugging a computer monitor with Tommy's face while they Skyped, and they put it on Baby's All About Me poster for preschool. Now it's time for Happily Ever After, right? And not quite. The following spring, Sue found out that her branch office in Texas was closing. She could transfer back to Missouri, but they couldn't promise her the same position or salary. Sue never felt like Texas was her home, and Elvira was her friend.
Not throw it. Do it. Cosito fits.
As wonderful as Texas was, Sue never felt like it was home. Elvira missed her friends. Tommy and Maggie's relationship was growing, so Sue decided to move back to Missouri. They moved into an apartment on Tommy's side of town, enrolled Baby in school, and Sue began working at her old office just a small step above where she started. Money was tight, but they were managing. Maggie was making friends. Elvira spent time with her old friends, and Sue went to work every day. Tommy, on the other hand, was excelling. He visited Maggie often, took her to the park, bought her toys, and they spent quality time together. Tommy was full of life and confidence. Sue was struggling and stressed out. Her circumstances had changed drastically. Since Tommy was doing so well, she called the customer service call center to see if her child support could be increased. They informed her that she could send a written request for modification. So Sue wrote a letter to request a mod. When the child support worker received the letter, she reviewed Sue's case. It had been more than 3 years since the order had been entered, modified, or reviewed for modification. So she updated Max, Sort 3, to show that the CP requested a modification. The mod specialist received notice to begin working the case. The modification specialist generated a notice of proposed review, or 627, along with the financial and informational statement, the 500, to Sue and Tommy. And how long do the parties have to complete their forms and return them? 10 days. Tommy called to ask why he'd gotten this paperwork, and Justa explained that Sue requested a review to have the child support obligation increased. Both parties would receive the financial and informational statement, and it was in their best interest to complete all the information so the modification worker had a clear and accurate picture of their expenses. Once the child support obligation is increased, they'd be notified of the proposed amount and have the opportunity to request a hearing. Tommy and Sue both filled out their 500s and mailed them back to Justa. What should Justa do with this information? She needs to update her appropriate weights on diary, update matter and MEMPD and MPR01 and Mensel, and calculate using the G-Cal screens. She completed her mini screens in Max to calculate the new presumed amount. And how much does the support have to change, whether it's an increase or a decrease, before we can actually modify it? 20%, right? Well, it did in fact go up by more than 20%. When Tommy received his motion for modification of the child support order, or 625, he was shocked. He contacted Justa immediately. She explained her calculations and discussed reasons for possible deviation. It didn't appear that Tommy had a reason to deviate. He did not have any other information to warrant a second calculation. She reminded Tommy that he did have the option of requesting a hearing, and informed him it was possible for the hearings officer to order a lower amount, the same amount, or a higher amount, depending on the facts presented in the hearing. Tommy faxed his written request for hearing to Justa. She prepared a hearing packet according to the procedural manual instructions and sent a copy to Sue, Tommy, the hearings unit, and kept a copy for herself. Within 2 weeks, each party received notification of the hearing date and time, and on the date of the hearing, Justa was ready with hearing packet in hand. The child support office she worked in had a hearing room. She even had a hearing script ready. She knew it would be required to read this during the hearing. The hearings officer contacted Justa first. Then he contacted the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent. Who is a hearings officer and who do they work for? Division of Legal Services. The hearings officer is an attorney, right? He doesn't represent the CP, the NCP, alleged father, an NPCR, or the child support agency. They're considered an unbiased party. Once all the parties were on the phone, the hearings officer introduced himself and asked the parties if they thought they could come to an agreement in the pre-hearing conference. This could be done prior to swearing in all the parties and actually going through the hearing. The parties were unsure, so the hearings officer asked Tommy if he was willing to pay the amount that was found in the child support obligation computation worksheet, and he wasn't. The hearings officer asked Sue if she was willing to accept a lower amount, and she was not at the time. So instead of the pre-hearing conference, the hearings officer explained to all of the parties what would happen during the hearing. Each party would have the opportunity to present their side and evidence, and then the hearings officer would take all of the information into account and come up with a hearings decision. Sue had requested a model just to calculate the new child support obligation using the Missouri Supreme Court guidelines, and a new modified amount that she came up with was not acceptable to the NCP, so he requested a hearing. And this was the summary that the hearings officer had provided. The parties were not able to come up with an agreement, and there was no reason for deviation. So they held their hearing. The hearings officer asked the child support worker to explain where she received her information and how she came to her conclusion. What is the best tool for Justa to use to provide this information? I heard somebody say it. 14S, the summary, is everybody used to The hearings officer asked the parties about their income and expenses as well as any other dependents. Neither party had any other dependents, so this wasn't a factor. Neither party had additional evidence to Sue provided the time, and the hearings officer stated that they would use the evidence that he had, make a determination, and each party would be notified in writing. If either party disagreed to the determination, they would have a right to request a further review. What's this called? A PJR, petition for judicial review. The hearing ended and the parties waited for a determination. After reviewing all the facts and completing a Form 14 of his own, the hearings officer came up with the same conclusion. The parties didn't provide any additional information during the hearing, so the original amount of modification stayed the same. The hearing decision was sent out to the parties, including the child support specialist. Tommy did not request a petition for judicial review. He also didn't make any more child support payments after the modification went into place. Tommy was bitter and angry with Sue for requesting a modification and refusing to agree to the lower amount. He loved little Maggie, but refused to pay the amount of child support that was ordered in the modification hearing decision. It didn't cost that much to raise one child.